When Brian's unexpected business trip came up, we had no choice but to cancel our family vacation. Seeing how down Emma was, I decided to take her to the amusement park to lift her spirits. After a day full of fun, we were in line for the Ferris wheel when Emma suddenly said,
"Look, that's Daddy."
I was stunned. There, hand in hand with a woman I didn't recognize, was Brian, looking cozy and deep in conversation. Fueled by anger, I approached them from behind and couldn't help but comment sarcastically, "Nice business trip you're on." Brian turned around, shocked. "I'm Sarah, a 34-year-old housewife, though I'll be 35 next month. It feels like I'm about to enter so-called around 40. When did I stop looking forward to my birthdays? I dread the thought of growing older in this monotonous routine." Brian is the same age as me, turning 35 this year. We met 7 years ago at a food manufacturing company and got married 5 years later. Emma, who was conceived around that time, is now 5 years old. Ever since her birth, time has seemed to fly by, probably because my days are filled with endless chores and parenting duties. In the prime of my career, I faced a crossroads that many find familiar: the decision to pursue my profession or prioritize my family. Ultimately, the scales tipped towards family as I stepped away from my job upon marrying Brian. The nature of my work, laden with unpredictable travel, seemed an insurmountable barrier to the kind of parent I aspired to be. Brian appeared to be on the same page, urging me to resign, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his motivations were less about shared parenting and more about having me support his own burgeoning career. It became glaringly apparent that Brian's engagement in household responsibilities and parenting was minimal at best. Throughout my pregnancy, amidst severe morning sickness, his presence was notably absent, a trend that continued unabated after our daughter Emma was born. He never involved himself in feeding or diapering our daughter after her birth, and even as she grew and began attending preschool, the responsibility of picking her up never fell to him. Reflecting on these dynamics, I've come to view my departure from the workforce not as a sacrifice but as the correct path for our family. Yet, this realization does not come without its challenges. My days are a whirlwind of solo parenting and managing our home, a reality that came into sharp focus one evening. After settling Emma into bed, I awaited Brian's return from work. I greeted him with a warm, "Welcome home. I'll warm up dinner for you." He only met with me a curt response that skipped pleasantries.
"What's for dinner tonight?"
he asked, his tone devoid of warmth. I told him of the baked fish and fresh salad I had prepared, only for him to wrinkle his nose in displeasure.
"Fish? I'm not really feeling that. What else is there?"
His disinterest in the meal I prepared was disheartening. When I suggested the leftovers from the previous night's hamburger steak, he was quick to dismiss, citing an unwillingness to eat the same meal 2 days in a row. "What do you want then?" I asked, visibly irritated. Frustration mounted as he opted for instant noodles, undermining the effort and care put into the home-cooked meal. "Instant noodles? After I've prepared a meal?" I protested, leading to a heated exchange where he snapped, claiming exhaustion and demanding no complaints.
"I'm tired. Don't argue with me."
"Who's really complaining here?" Echoed my own frustration, a sentiment abruptly interrupted by Emma's voice from the living room.
"Mommy, I'm thirsty."
"Oh, Emma, I'm sorry. Did we wake you?" I apologized, fetching her water and returning her to bed. Our compact apartment easily carried our voices, disturbing the peace of our small family. This was the reality of our daily lives. When I returned to the living room a while later, I found the remains of Brian's instant noodles, the cup still half full of broth and the disposable chopsticks carelessly left on the table, but Brian was nowhere to be seen. It seemed he had retreated to the bathroom. With a sigh, I cleaned up the mess. It's not like our kitchen is a restaurant where any dish you desire is readily available at a moment's notice. Even in a restaurant, you wouldn't expect to order Indian curry in a place specializing in Japanese cuisine. This moment of domestic mundanity led me to question the universal experiences of spouses everywhere. I wondered, is this just how husbands are? How do others navigate the daily dilemma of meal planning? I yearned for guidance as I wiped down the table, lost in thought. Despite everything, I understood the pressures of Brian's job all too well, having been in the workforce myself. I remember how the stress of busy periods often left me irritable. Recognizing this, I wondered, if not for my own experiences, who else could truly empathize with the pressures he faced? I realized that nobody else might. With this in mind, I decided to avoid such trivial disputes that occasionally erupted between us, choosing instead to focus on harmony. In an effort to inject some much-needed refreshment into our lives, I broached the idea of a vacation. "Do you think you can get days off for the Memorial Day weekend?" I asked him in the evening.
"Yay, It looks like it.
Brian responded, a hint of relaxation in his tone for the first time in weeks. Great. How about we take a trip somewhere just to get away for a bit? I suggested. Brian's positive reaction to the idea of a vacation was a pleasant surprise. And Emma, she was overjoyed beyond my expectations.
Awesome. Where are we going?
She exclaimed with a bright smile that filled the room. From that moment, our daily conversations were dominated by plans for the trip. I busied myself with booking hotels and researching attractions, ensuring our vacation would be memorable for both Brian and Emma. However, as preparations were made last minute, finding available accommodations proved to be a challenge. After much searching, I finally secured a place for us to stay. 2 days before we were set to leave, I excitedly gathered my daughter, Emma, and my husband, Brian, around the kitchen where I had my phone propped up, displaying our hotel booking. Look at this, guys. I've booked us this hotel, I said, unable to hide the thrill in my voice.
Oh my goodness, look at that room. It's huge.
Emma exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with excitement. I actually tried to find a smaller, cozier room, but it seems like this was the only option available at the last minute. But you know what? Why not? Let's live a little, I reasoned, trying to justify the splurge to myself as much as to them.
Daddy, we're going to have so much fun.
Emma turned to Brian with a beaming smile.
Yay, it does sound pretty cool.
Brian responded, though his voice lacked the usual cheerfulness, tinged instead with a note of weariness. Concerned he might be coming down with something right before our trip, I couldn't help but worry. Well, it's getting late and we've got a big day ahead of us. How about we all head to bed early tonight? I suggested, hoping a good night's sleep would rejuvenate him. Taking Emma's hand, I led her to her room, our steps light with anticipation for the adventure that awaited us. Despite our excitement, I couldn't shake the feeling that Brian was not quite in the same spirit. It wasn't until the following evening, the night before our departure, that the reality of Brian's concerns came crashing down. In a moment of quiet amid our packing frenzy, Brian found the words to break the news.
I'm really sorry, but I can't make the trip with you too. A last-minute work emergency came up, and I have to deal with it.
He explained, his tone heavy with regret. Wait, what? But we've been planning this vacation for months. How can work suddenly crop up like this? I questioned, my voice a mix of disbelief and frustration.
There's been a mishap with one of the deliveries at work, and it's fallen on me to sort it out urgently.
He detailed, the stress evident in his furrowed brow. Isn't there someone else who could handle this? I pressed, desperate for a solution that wouldn't spoil our family plans.
I wish there was, but it's a client I'm directly responsible for.
Brian admitted, his shoulders slumping in defeat. So, you're saying your work is more important than our family vacation? I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice, feeling both disappointed and a bit angry.
It's not about importance. It's work, and I don't have a choice.
He said, his voice firm yet apologetic. But we just talked about this trip with Emma yesterday. She's been looking forward to it so much. I reminded him, hoping to tug at his heartstrings.
Enough, I've already told you. It's not possible.
Brian snapped, a rare edge of irritation in his voice before he turned and disappeared into our bedroom. I stood there, stunned and heartbroken, the joy of our upcoming trip overshadowed by the sudden change of plans. What made it even harder was knowing that Emma, currently asleep and dreaming of the fun we'd have, would wake up to disappointing news. The thought of explaining the situation to her, of seeing her excitement turn to sadness, made my heart ache unbearably. The next morning, after Brian had left for his sudden work trip, I found myself dialing the hotel to cancel our reservation. Canceling our long-awaited vacation was a heart-sinking task. Each word I spoke to the hotel clerk felt like a tiny betrayal to the promise of family time I had made to Emma. Once the call ended, a heavy silence fell over me, the weight of disappointment anchoring me to the spot for a moment longer than I'd care to admit. Gathering my courage, I turned to face the day and the difficult conversation ahead. Emma, still in her pajamas, her hair a tousled mess from sleep, came bouncing into the kitchen, her usual morning brightness shadowing her face. She was the picture of innocence and excitement, unaware of the news I was about to deliver. Honey, I have some bad news. I began, my voice softer than usual, trying to cushion the blow. Daddy had to go to work unexpectedly, and we won't be able to go on our trip today. The confusion and then sadness that crossed her face broke my heart. She murmured a small, understanding,
Oh.
But the disappointment was clear in her eyes as they started to brim with tears. For a few moments, she tried to hold back her emotions, but the dam eventually broke and she was crying openly, her small body shaking with sobs. It was a sight that tore at my very soul, seeing her so upset. I enveloped her in a hug, my own eyes moistening as I whispered apologies and stroked her hair. I'm so sorry, sweetie. What do you say you and I go on an adventure, just the two of us today, huh? Would you like that? I suggested, desperate to see her smile again. Through her tears, she sniffled and then, with a hopeful glimmer in her eyes, she said,
Can we go to the amusement park?
Her face, though smeared with tears and runny nose, lit up with the prospect of an unexpected adventure. The amusement park sounds perfect, I agreed, my heart lightening at her enthusiasm. Our local amusement park was a place of magic and joy, a place where the worries of the world seemed to disappear the moment you stepped through its gates. It was exactly what we needed. With a newfound purpose, we quickly got ready, our spirits lifting with each step we took towards our spontaneous day out. At the park, Emma's laughter filled the air, her earlier sorrow forgotten as she darted from ride to ride, her energy seemingly boundless. I watched her with a bittersweet joy, thankful for the moments of happiness we were sharing, yet mindful of the shadow that had brought us here. As the day waned and fatigue began to set in, Emma's pace slowed, her steps heavy with the day's adventures.
I'm tired,
she admitted, a yawn punctuating her words. All right, let's go home.
Can we try one more ride? I want to ride that one.
The Ferris wheel? Sure, let's go. We joined the line, the Ferris wheel towering above us, its lights twinkling like stars against the twilight sky. It's beautiful, I murmured, lost in the moment. Then, Emma's tug on my hand brought me back to reality.
Look, Mommy, it's Daddy,
she said, pointing towards a couple ahead of us in line. My heart stopped for a moment as I followed her gaze, my eyes landing on Brian, unmistakably holding hands with a woman who was not me. You're mistaken, I said, trying to dismiss the unsettling thought as I turned my gaze back to the Ferris wheel, hoping to recapture the joy of the moment. However, fate, it seemed, had other plans. The queue shuffled forward, and as the line snaked back around, the couple we had spotted earlier came into direct view. My heart, which had been fluttering with a mix of hope and dread, sank. There, illuminated by the soft glow of the Ferris wheel lights, was Brian, my husband, unmistakably himself. The shock of recognition was immediate, a jolt of realization that turned my stomach.
It really is Daddy.
Emma's voice broke through my shock, her tone a mix of excitement and bewilderment. But Brian seemed entirely unaware of our presence. He was engrossed in conversation with the woman beside him, their laughter and easy familiarity a stark contrast to the confusion and hurt welling up inside me. He was supposed to urgent business trip merely a fabrication, a convenient lie to cover up this clandestine getaway? The thought that Brian had chosen to spend these days with another woman over a family vacation we had all been looking forward to felt like a betrayal. I couldn't help but wonder if the plans for this secret excursion had been laid out well in advance, even before the day he had appeared so distracted and disinterested in our trip. Perhaps his lack of enthusiasm wasn't due to illness or fatigue, but a reluctance to join us, his mind already on this other engagement. As I stood there, trying to make sense of the scene unfolding before me, our positions in the queue brought us momentarily side by side. Brian turned away from us, was all smiles and laughter, clearly enjoying the company of the woman he was with. The pain of the moment, mixed with a rising sense of outrage, spurred me into action. Looks like a fun business trip. I couldn't keep a bite of sarcasm from my voice, the words cutting through the air with precision. Brian's reaction was immediate. He turned, his expression one of sheer disbelief, his eyes wide, his mouth agape, as if he had seen a ghost.
Daddy.
Emma's voice, filled with innocence and confusion, added to the surreal nature of the moment. The woman, sensing the shift in atmosphere, quickly distanced herself, releasing Brian's hand as if it were a hot coal. Finally, Brian spoke, though his attempted explanation was so far-fetched it bordered on the absurd.
It's not what it looks like. I was just checking the Ferris wheel for safety.
The words hung in the air, an inadequate attempt to cover the unmistakable truth of the situation. Why would someone from sales be doing safety checks? And at a food company, no less? Plus, you're clearly here to ride, not inspect, I retorted, the absurdity of his excuse making the situation almost laughable despite the pain. Emma, it's time to go, I declared, my voice laced with a resolve that had long been brewing. I had reached a point where my husband Brian's actions, or lack thereof, no longer affected me, and I was ready to leave the scene of our latest disagreement. As I turned to leave, my daughter Emma looked up at me with a puzzled expression and innocently asked,
Aren't we going to play with Daddy today?
I paused, the weight of her question sinking in. Honey, it seems like Dad has other priorities, maybe even someone else he values more than us. I replied, trying to mask the hurt in my voice. Emma's face twisted into a frown, a mix of confusion and sorrow flashing in her eyes.
I didn't say that.
Ryan interjected, trying to salvage the situation, but it was too late.
Daddy's the worst. He never spends time with me anymore, and I don't like him at all now.
Emma's outburst was loud and filled with the kind of hurt only a child could express. She turned on her heel and ran, her small figure disappearing into the distance.
Wait, Emma.
Ryan called out after her, but he might as well have been talking to the wind, his voice trailing off as he stood there, looking lost and helpless. I didn't spare him another glance, nor the woman standing next to him, wiping away nervous sweat. My focus was solely on catching up to Emma. When I finally did, I found her face red with anger and her eyes brimming with tears. I'm sorry we didn't get to ride the Ferris wheel, sweetie. How about we grab some popcorn from that stand over there instead? I offered, hoping to ease her disappointment and distract her from the pain.
I don't want it. I hate Daddy. I don't want the Ferris wheel, the popcorn, or Daddy.
Emma's rejection was fierce, her disappointment in her father palpable. Is that so? I asked softly, my heart breaking for her.
Yeah, because you're sad, Mommy. And when you're sad, I'm sad too.
She explained, her logic simple yet profound. In that moment, hearing the pain in Emma's voice and seeing the tears in her eyes, I made up my mind. Ryan had crossed a line, causing our daughter such distress. I couldn't forgive him for that. On our way home, I made a detour to my parents' house to explain everything and leave Emma with them. Then, alone, I returned to our house to search Brian's room. What I found on his computer confirmed my worst fears: messages between him and another woman. Among the messages, there were several exchanges that revealed a long and deep connection with the other woman. As I stared at those messages, any lingering affection I had for my husband completely evaporated. During this time, my phone was bombarded with calls and messages from Brian, but I systematically blocked them all, cutting off any means of communication. While I was packing my belongings, Brian made an unexpected return home, possibly driven by a cocktail of guilt and the realization that his deceit had been uncovered. The clock had already welcomed the night, suggesting he had spent the evening brainstorming excuses over dinner with his mistress, rather than confronting the wreckage of our marriage. Whether he was truly remorseful, I couldn't tell. As he stumbled upon my presence, he began
About earlier.
an attempt to broach the subject. My patience had worn thin, leaving no room for his justifications. Cutting him off, I read aloud the passionate exchanges between him and the other woman from the computer screen. Looking forward to our trip tomorrow. Being with you feels more important than any family commitment. His reaction was immediate and frantic.
Stop, please.
Ryan panicked, trying to snatch a computer away from me while shouting.
What are you snooping around for? That's creepy.
That was the last straw for me. Creepy? What's truly vile is your affair with someone younger, sneaking around behind my back. And now you return, what, to lay blame at my feet? Even though the fault lies squarely with you, I challenged him further. Did it take all evening to craft your apologies with her? Is there even a shred of remorse in you? Confronted with my barrage of accusations, Brian's defense crumbled, manifesting in a feeble apology.
I'm sorry.
But his words were too little, too late. The notion of forgiveness was a ship that had long since sailed. We're getting a divorce, I declared with finality. His plea was desperate.
No, please. Anything but that. I'll apologize. I'll do anything.
His promises of reparation were empty. A futile attempt to mend the irreparable. Do anything? And what would that be? You think some gesture can undo this mess? It's ridiculous. With those final words, I grabbed my bags and left the house, leaving behind a marriage shattered by betrayal and lies. After finalizing my divorce, I embarked on a new chapter in my life, experiencing both the freedom and challenges that came with it. The legal battle that ensued was emotionally taxing, but necessary. I demanded a hefty settlement of $30,000 from my ex-husband and his mistress, a sum that felt justified given the betrayal. Furthermore, securing child support until our daughter, Emma, came of age was non-negotiable. The mistress, a younger colleague of my ex's from his office, reacted with fury when faced with the lawsuit. Their affair crumbled under the pressure, leading to her dramatic exit from both the relationship and her job. She even confronted his boss in a bold move to have him demoted before she stormed out for good. The scandal, once exposed at his workplace, left my ex with a tarnished reputation, resulting in a demotion and a reduction in pay. Without me to keep his life in order, his personal appearance took a nosedive. He struggled with the basics, like ironing his shirts, and his mornings were chaotic without someone to wake him. His habitual tardiness became a joke at the office, cementing his status as a liability rather than an asset. I couldn't help but laugh when I heard about his downward spiral from my former in-laws. They shared my disbelief and disappointment in the man he had become, choosing to cut financial ties and distance themselves from the mess. On my end, starting over meant leaning on my parents and moving back home with Emma. Taking on a full-time job was a necessity, but it also brought a sense of purpose and independence I hadn't felt in years. The support from my parents was unwavering, and watching Emma grow into a strong and resilient young woman filled me with pride. Despite our reduced time together, our bond remained unbreakable.
Mommy, welcome home.
Emma's voice, filled with excitement, greeted me as I stepped through the door after a long day at work. "Hi, Emma. How was your day?" As I responded and took a closer look, I noticed she was nervously hiding something behind her back.
Mommy,
She began, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "What's up, Emma? What's going on?" I prodded gently, curious about her hesitance.
happy birthday. This is from me.
She exclaimed, revealing her surprise. In the whirlwind of work and daily responsibilities, my own birthday had slipped my mind entirely. She handed me a rolled-up piece of paper, her small fingers trembling slightly with excitement. As I unrolled the paper, a rush of emotions overcame me. It was a portrait of me, drawn with the innocent and loving hand of my daughter.
Look, Mommy, it's you. Do you like it?
She asked, her eyes shining with hope and love. "Emma, this is wonderful. Thank you so much." I responded, pulling her into a tight embrace. This moment reminded me that there is beauty in aging, that with each year comes a depth of experience and love that only time can provide. Feeling Emma's warmth in my arms, I realized that these moments were the true gifts of life. I held her close, smiling through tears of joy, grateful for the love that remained the constant in our ever-changing world.